A brutal and devastating war is coming to a close, but the worst is yet to come. And nobody's talking about this. We're talking about the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, but to get information on what's happening here, you got to dig deep. You got to seek it out. It's not popping up across most media outlets, but I think it's really important. Now, I am far from an expert on this conflict, not even close, right? So what I did here in the hopes of just sharing some information about what's going on there is I sought out a handful of sources that I trust and have trusted for a long time, and I'm going to present some of their information just to try to get some people up to speed, right? So don't take this video as the end-all, be-all, absolute truth, a full understanding of the entire conflict, because it's really complex. I hope you take this just as a little bit, something to maybe look elsewhere, look into other sources and better understand what is actually happening here. To give an idea of just how complex this is, Armenia is a member state of the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is kind of Russia's answer to NATO, right? So you would look at that and say Armenia is a Russian ally. And in turn, you get a lot of people right now, based off of what Russia is doing in Ukraine, saying, good, Armenia should lose whatever they're doing because they are allied with Russia. But at the same time, Armenia has given humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and are currently involved with training exercises with U.S. forces. Armenia is far from lockstep with the Russian Federation, and there's a large aspect within Armenia that wants nothing to do with Russia at all. So just don't take that one piece, the CSTO piece, and assume that Armenia is Russia and Russia is Armenia. But as we get into this, one of the sources I really trust on this is Neil Hauer, who puts out great information on the war in Ukraine on Twitter and has followed the Caucasus region for some time. We'll run through one of his articles here. And I would also suggest Jake Hanrahan of Popular Front, who just follows a lot of kind of underreported conflicts, is I think their tagline in Popular Front. And they do a great job. And he's done a handful of podcasts on this topic alone, both 100% worth diving into. In Hauer's article, he says the tense and often violated ceasefire that has governed the region since the end of the 2020 Second Karabakh War was overwhelmingly violated by Azerbaijan around 1 p.m. local time on Tuesday. That was September 19th. Azerbaijani military units, which have been gathering near the line of contact in Nagorno-Karabakh and on the borders of Armenia for weeks, launched a massive assault across all areas of the Nagorno-Karabakh front line. So this region, Nagorno-Karabakh, is kind of between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There's a long history of who thinks they own that territory, and there's a lot of Armenians that live within. They say 24 hours later, it was all over. Weakened by 9 months of siege and starvation without any supply lines to the outside world and hopelessly outmatched by Azerbaijan's modern military. The Artsakh Defense Army would be dissolved, its weapons would be handed over, and the region would finally and definitively come under Azerbaijani control. So one of the aspects from the last conflict, kind of the enduring piece after that portion of the fighting ended, was that there was this kind of one supply line in and out of the Nagorno-Karabakh region, and it had been under siege. It was supposed to be kept open by Russian peacekeepers. It looks like, the outside looking in, that they didn't do much to keep it open, and there was widespread starvation in the area. Lots of civilians there. People down to like bread, a little bit of bread each day kind of thing, which is horrible. And in terms of the outmatching here, the Artsakh Defense Army was, a local militia type at best. It was not the Armenian military. What we saw here in the last week was not Azerbaijan versus Armenia. It was Azerbaijan versus this relatively local defense force that for months now has seen little to no supplies. And the Azerbaijan military, is not a superpower, not by a long shot, but when compared against a relatively local militia, it wasn't even close. They say in the 2020 war, much of Nagorno-Karabakh had been captured. Around 75% of the lands held by Karabakh Armenians before 2020 were conquered by Azerbaijan or ceded to them in the ceasefire agreement. And this is a conflict that's been going on for some time. This is where a lot of people pointed to as kind of the first modern drone war, in a sense. There was a lot of drone footage coming out. There's already been drone footage coming out from this most recent ceasefire violation. And you'll have a lot of people pointing to those saying that it's very overtly civilian infrastructure. In a lot of senses, they're being struck. Azerbaijan, their stance is that it is infrastructure that assists the defense of the region by those Artsakh forces. They say the 9 months of Azerbaijani blockade that began in December 2022 has been met with indifference from the international community, with urges and calls for Azerbaijan to reopen the corridor, Nagorno-Karabakh's single lifeline to the outside world, but no consequences when Azerbaijan refused to do so, ignoring even the International Court of Justice ruling on the matter. Personal opinion, I think we've just been focused elsewhere. The news media has been focused elsewhere. I mean, I've even commented recently how little of the kind of mainstream news, if you will, the major news outlets, how little of that coverage is dedicated to the war between Ukraine and Russia, which, whether you want to follow it or not, is a major, major geopolitical event, arguably the largest in our lifetimes. And it's still just, the occasional article in the New York Times, the occasional article in the Wall Street Journal. And I think that there just haven't been a lot of people in the international community interested in what's happening in the Caucasus, happening between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And unfortunately, I think that's probably set the stage for what could be some pretty catastrophic events there in the relatively near term. They say the Russian peacekeeping mission entrusted with ensuring the road remained open and active similarly demurred from any real attempts to unblock it. And this was an argument I heard, I think it was on the podcast, the Popular Front podcast, that because Russia wasn't really doing much to really maintain that peace and the international community wasn't responding at all, it just gave the green light for Azerbaijan to go on in and do what they want with the region. Now, in talking about that short, deadly fight, they say the 24-hour war involved massive casualties. Nagorno-Karabakh's authorities have confirmed over 200 dead and 400 wounded from their side, a number that is sure to rise as more bodies are found, while Azerbaijani social media reports place the number of Azerbaijani casualties at over 150. That's a lot for a relatively small conflict. If you look at the scope of it, in a 24-hour period of time, that is pretty intense fighting. They say in the wake of the Azerbaijani assault and subsequent capture of numerous villages and key roads, tens of thousands of the region's 120,000 inhabitants have been displaced. And this is where we're going to go the rest of this article by Hauer, where the military aspect is pretty much done. Right, the Artsakh defense forces have laid down their arms. The Armenian prime minister has said that they are not going to get involved militarily in this conflict, even though there are Armenians in this region that are now going to come under Azerbaijani control. So what we're going to see going forward, it appears, is not necessarily a military conflict, but it's a big question of what happens to the civilians in that area, and the outlook does not appear to be good. They say other areas and towns are entirely isolated. The second and third largest settlements in Nagorno-Karabakh are surrounded by Azerbaijani forces, their populations unable to escape, with little known about their condition. Adding in this near total information blackout with no independent media access and limited internet connectivity, rumors of Azerbaijani atrocities have spread. One woman claimed that Azerbaijani troops had beheaded her 3 young children in front of her. Another said that the same had happened to a Karabakh Armenian soldier. There has been, again, it's not on the front page, but if you dig through things like Telegram, a little bit on Twitter, you can find some of these blatant war crimes being posted and bragged about. And this was not a clean war, if you will. There was a lot of hatred. There was a lot of innocent bloodshed as this war has raged over the last couple of years. And there's no real reason to think that that's going to change now. Hauer adds there is little verification or ability to confirm these claims, but there is ample precedent for them. Azerbaijani troops have previously filmed themselves beheading elderly Karabakh Armenian civilians, have executed groups of POWs, and indiscriminately bombarded Karabakh settlements. In the coming days, videos of atrocities committed over the past few days are likely to come to light. I mean, they might come to light, sure, and they should. That's a good thing, but realistically, why would we expect that to get any sort of serious circulation or to have any sort of consequences for the forces carrying that out, the individuals or the governments in any sense, right? I mean, this isn't new. It's been happening for a long time, so why this time is that going to be any different? Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, said he hoped the Karabakh Armenians would still be able to live a safe and dignified life there, but that Armenia was ready and able to accept 40,000 families if the need arose. This has been a really interesting aspect of this, the idea that Armenian citizens are under siege, facing some of these atrocities, and the Armenian government has said, we're not gonna intervene. And don't quote me on this, I'd have to double check, but I'm not sure that any passages have been opened for civilians to leave the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Like, even if somebody says, I want to leave and go to Armenia, like the prime minister says they can, I don't know that that's an option right now. And Azerbaijan has presented a lot of this as an anti-terror operation, which kind of sets the stage for anybody who's here is supporting that terrorism, right? It is really lining up to be an awful situation for the civilians that lived in that area. An Armenian journalist had a great line here where he said, quote, "Most people in Armenia don't know what to do. Caught between Pashinyan and the opposition. By going to protests, you stir up chaos, which serves Russia and Azerbaijan. Not going would mean silently agreeing with Pashinyan's disastrous policies." They're just in a tough spot. It goes back to what I brought up at the very beginning of this video. I just hope people don't look at this and say Armenia, member state of the CSTO, Russian ally. Check, move on. Now I have my opinions. Now I know how I feel about Armenia and the Armenian people. They're trying to find this middle ground where they don't like what their leader is doing, but pushing back on that to a degree to actually implement change brings up this chaos that serves Russia and their direct adversary in this conflict, Azerbaijan. Armenia is not the full-fledged Russian ally that I think they're sometimes made out to be. Not today, at least. And in wrapping up, they say there are few reasons for optimism. A presidential advisor in Nagorno-Karabakh said that there are no concrete results from Baku on either security guarantees for the population of Karabakh or regarding amnesty for its soldiers and leaders, all of whom Azerbaijan regards as criminals and terrorists. That's what I mean when at the beginning of the video, I said the war might be over, but it looks like things are about to get a lot worse. So there's no guarantee for the civilians to leave or to live there peacefully or what status they will be given, if it's going to be an occupied territory, if they're going to be displaced, if they're going to be second-class citizens, what that could entail, or worse, right? And then when they're looking at the security forces, the Artsakh defense forces that were trying to defend their territory and protect their families, those are all viewed as criminals and terrorists. Are they arrested? Are they executed? Are they tortured? Are they just kicked out? There's a lot of room for this to go in some pretty nasty areas in the very short term. So again, I hope anybody who watches this video doesn't take this as the end-all be-all. Now you're an expert in what's going on in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Just the very, very smallest tip of the iceberg, if you will. Go look at other sources. Check out Neil Hauer and Jake Hanrahan and others. Look them up on your own. Find other ways to stay informed if you're interested in this conflict. You're going to have to do that because, quite frankly, you're not going to be able to open up your normal news site and find this at the top of the stream anytime soon. But it does look like, this is the kind of thing where in 15, 20 years, we very well might look back and say, how on earth did we let something that horrible happen right under our noses? But that's all I got for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.